Sabrina Animated Series Episode 2. You'd think the intro wouldn't have Harvey riding on Sabrina's broom with her since the whole premise hasn't been oblivious. Though it makes sense anyways because she could wipe his memory of it whenever. It just doesn't seem in character for animated series Sabrina. Sabrina opens a cage door to release a mouse and he just runs up to Cheese to get it, which disappoints her and Harvey, who thinks the mouse should be a genius by now and want him to go through a maze. Gem's always a waste of time. I wonder if I'll miss anything by skipping most of her dialogue. I mean, if she really matters, she'll still be a major part of a climax. The science teacher says a professor's visiting the town, so he urges the classroom to do their best. Quigley reveals he made a huge maze for the mouse. Harvey gets told to go upstairs, and Quigley says he's proud of Sabrina. He condescendingly says she's focusing on science and not relying on magic. Fuck Quigley. Besides, doesn't he know she's only doing this because the science teacher forced her to? The mouse impresses them, making Sabrina get to enjoy another hug, and Sabrina says Salem's jealous of all the attention the mouse is getting. She knows she shouldn't let Salem supervise the mouse. He wastes time denying that he's a cat and somehow guilts her when regardless, she should know he's somehow a slave to cat instincts anyways. So there's no excuse for letting him supervise a mouse. The next day, she eventually realizes the mouse is gone and Salem burps. When she accuses him of eating the mouse, he says that she should have known that happened because he's a cat. Wow, surprisingly dark. He actually did eat her precious mouse. He could have just zapped up an exact copy of the mouse and eaten that. He could have done that until he was full. Surprisingly, she tells Salem to turn himself into a mouse rather than keeping it simple and telling him to zap up an exact copy of the mouse. Or zapping up the mouse herself. It can't be hard for someone to visualize something, so there's no excuse for not doing that. Instead, she relies on spooky. Why wasn't it immediately explained why he's in the house? Why wasn't he in the first episode? So she uses a paper from him to turn Salem to a mouse, who inexplicably can still talk. I guess the witch's spell that mercifully lets him still talk is just impossible to overpower. She should really explain that she knows she could zap up a new Chester, and she just wants to punish Salem, because otherwise the plot is forced. Obviously Quigley would know this isn't Chester, especially since he remarks on how he's chubbier. I'm glad he gets sprayed with water. Hilda's dirty because Zelda made her clean up her junk from the attic. So she asks Sabrina to give her a hand with her absolutely idiotic way of cleaning the attic without magic. And Hilda's free of dirt next scene, so obviously she used magic to clean herself up, and yet won't clean the attic with magic. Sabrina approaches the door, which she was told has something to do with the netherworld, and she's left unsupervised with it somehow. So she opens it and wanders around in the arbitrarily confusing, scientifically impossible world, which can be justified with magic overuse. She sees aliens behind a door. Why did the witch realm only show aliens in it? It only makes sense if the aliens were there because they're witches too. Sabrina can't find the door back home, so it's forced that she doesn't instantly warp back home. Why didn't Salem look the same as Chester? Why did Sabrina see a copy of herself? They must have been on drugs when they thought of this. Normally I would think that's a compliment because it means you're being really creative, but it doesn't actually matter to the plot. This whole scene could have been cut out. Harvey eventually puts Salem in the mouse maze. Why is Salem refusing to go through the maze? He should want to make it up to Sabrina. Because Gem calls Sabrina a loser along with him, he does go through the whole maze. Why didn't anyone hear him talk? Hilda tells Sabrina that the way out was the door with the exit sign. So that really was forced, even in the logic of the episode. Sabrina lies to Quigley that something's in the backyard to smartly manipulate him into leaving the room. So she takes paper out of the spooky jar. Why does she think she has to do that? Nobody would be so stupid that she'd need to do that for magic. And again, I don't know why Spooky's even in the house, in a household that doesn't want Sabrina using magic. Harvey tells her she won. Dr. Houston was so impressed he gave Harvey $10 for Salem to make him an astronaut, and Harvey offers Sabrina $5. Why is he going to be used as an astronaut when who knows what he'll even need to do in space, just because he's smart? Even the world's smartest mouse would still not be more useful than any other normal mouse, because it's only so smart it can be. It is realistic that they can't think of what to use a smart mouse for, because either way it's too small to actually use his intelligence for anything with no education. Sabrina explains away why she's upset, that she bonded with Chester. Quigley tells Sabrina he's proud of her for winning the science fair as he drives a car with her in it. He tells the officer he's here for the tour. This episode sure has a lot of padding. Why linger on the scene with just Salem in a cage? There's no reason the professor wouldn't even react when Salem talks. At least the sitcom didn't make that mistake. It had a consequence for the whole episode when someone heard him. Sabrina and Harvey run from somebody, and Harvey presses a button thinking it'll be a light switch which turns off the gravity. It's charming to see them fly around for fun. She can't stop, so he tells her to grab something and a button is pressed to scare them. The guard turns off the anti-gravity, so they fall, acting hurt from it. But they're still able to run around the rest of the plot and end up going to the thing that spins. Quigley wishes Sabrina was here to see this because she'd love it. At least he does care about her happiness, unless it involves her making herself happy with magic. Harvey apologizes and says this is all his fault. But it couldn't have saved Salem. Salem throws cheese at Quigley's head to get his attention. I have a question. Since he has magic, why doesn't he use it to instantly save himself? Sabrina would simply warp Salem to her and end the plot immediately. It wouldn't be hard to visualize him. And like with freezing time, I'm pretty sure they're gonna do that at some point in the show, proving that witches can do that. While she did tell Harvey she wanted the mouse back, the fact remains she would have been able to make him forget that. So she won't be stuck having to resolve things the mortal way. But no. The animated series Sabrina can't erase a memory. She never did so in the comic. Eventually, Sabrina opens a door and the guard gets warped away because Sabrina opens a piece of paper. And also, Salem returns to normal. Couldn't she have just asked Spooky for a piece of paper that would warp Salem back to her? If there's no apparent limit on what the scrolls can do? I mean, she could also ask Spooky to erase Harvey's memory of what happened to the mouse. Quigley annoys me saying he's waiting and she tackles him. The guard gets punished for being annoying because he's replaced Salem in the rocket. Like everything that happens because Sabrina didn't just use Spooky to get Salem back was just annoying. Quigley reveals he made sure the countdown would have taken longer because he walked around without his pants. Why didn't we see that? Sabrina hugs him for it, and the story ends. She asks how he knew the mouse was Salem, and it turns out that Salem wrote a message in the cheese he threw at his head. So this episode was about Sabrina making Salem get turned into a mouse to replace the one he ate for a science project, even though it's instantly obvious she or Salem could simply zap up a new version of that mouse and avoid the plot. But this could have been made to make sense if Sabrina explained that she just wants to spite Salem for being too mean to simply zap up enough food that he would be too full to eat Chester. But she ends up getting karma for it because Salem's success in the maze gets him put in a rocket meant to be sent to space. Because apparently the professor thinks smart mice are more likely to survive being put through this for no reason. There's no excuse for the plot being so long, because obviously Sabrina would have pointed to instantly return Salem to her. She could have also told Spooky or one of her aunts to do that, if she was somehow too stupid to herself because she's new to magic, which isn't even verbally expressed as the excuse most of the time. Even then, she still would have warped to the science fair right away when she got lost and prevented Salem from being kidnapped. Her being a kid is no excuse because we're supposed to think kids have imagination. So she should have had the imagination to think of when to use her powers. This was a fine episode to watch, because I didn't hate my experience. Quigley was racist against magic, but like last episode, it never led to discipline anyways, even though the plot only happens from the wrong spell being used. Sabrina Animated Series Episode 3. I hate that there's narration about life by Sabrina. It's pretentious, especially since the earlier episodes didn't have that. There's a poster put up about a dance, and there's a silly moment where Sabrina and Jem stand in front of each other like it's a Wild West standoff. I guess Sabrina thinks she's too moral to just brainwash her. Sabrina jumps into the dirt, and eventually asks Harvey if he'd be willing to go with her to the dance. And the whole time Jem could have just interrupted her. He uncharacteristically gets nervous and says he's not going with either her or Jem because he's not going to the dance at all. Somehow someone saying that makes everyone shocked, cars crash, and a plane crash. Salem gets bullied with magic for being annoying, hypocritically. And Hilda assumes the school dances are like the 1780s. It's always charming when they make use of how old the ants are. Sabrina wants to do a perception spell to make Harvey say what's wrong. And Hilda wants her to just go over to his house and ask him why, and she warps into his door. But isn't it obvious he won't tell her what's wrong? But it is moral of her to not want her to use a spell that pokes around in his mind. Sabrina did with Aaron in the sitcom. Come to think of it, it was reckless of her to warp her to his door because for all she knew, a mortal would see that. But I assume she assumes that spy witch would erase the memory of any mortal that saw that. Eventually, Harvey says he can't dance. Sabrina somehow expects me to believe that because it's middle school, nobody cares if you can really dance and you just have to improvise. It's like the writer forgot that bullying is a very constant thing, so kids will jump at any excuse to make fun of you. He eventually says that his mom made him take ballet, which is abusive of her because in real life, that will literally get a guy bullied for the rest of the time he's in school. The flashback goes on too long. Him moving his legs actually breaks something and summons ghosts and cracks the wall. This would only make sense if he was cursed by a witch. Sabrina accuses him of exaggerating and asks what really happened, when she should believe him because she's a witch. Even if it is unlikely that it happened. We see that what really happened is that he somehow went backwards and knocked a wall over on a piano player to injure him. He says his feet are weapons, and it's normy that he says he dances alone when we're supposed to take this seriously. Like, if you don't want us to take it seriously, why would you ever make plots that are supposed to be taken seriously? Sabrina tells Hilda that Harvey won't dance because he's afraid he'll be a klutz. In the 70s comic, he is a klutz, so he's smart here. Hilda looks sympathetic by explaining to her a story from her past, where she had a friend who had a dance problem. Her friend from the past was going to dance with her at a disco from centuries ago. Obviously, the disco is in the witch world, or was introduced to mortals early by witches. His dancing got the other girls in love with him, and he happily ditched her. And she tells her she dumped him, and she talks as if he's still alive. That should mean her ex is a witch too. So she told her this to make her feel better about the fact that Harvey doesn't want to dance by showing her that it'd be bad if he danced well. Didn't work. I mean, she does just want him to dance with her for that one school dance. And besides, she knows that Harvey isn't the type to just happily ditch her for a bunch of other pretty girls at the drop of a hat. At least in this show anyways. So of course they didn't talk her out of it. So Salem says very interesting and offers to help Sabrina. She could brainwash Harvey out of his problem, but if she did, he might get completely obsessed with dancing. So I guess it is smart of her not to. And she thinks she's too moral to do that. Instead, he tells Sabrina that she could get the help of Hilda's ex to help Harvey. So she reads a spell out loud. Somehow this causes the house to shake for a while. Why? Why would a spell to summon specifically Hilda's ex even be in the spell book? Why won't the spell just result in Hilda's ex warping to her? If it always made a house shake, that could injure people or even kill them. And besides, it'd be an inconvenience to the person who's summoned, when he could be doing anything at that point. He arrogantly says he's the Lord of the Dance and is surprised that he's on Earth, even though obviously the other realm bedrooms would look the same as mortal bedrooms. The guy she had no reason to get to meet says he doesn't want to consort with mortals when he has other things to do. He says he's got a new Janet Jackson video to choreograph, when he just said he doesn't help mortals. So either Janet is a witch in this universe, in which case she'd have used magic to make people forget about her most embarrassing moment. He says it'll only help her if she signs a contract, and of course she doesn't read it out of desperation for his help. Let me guess, the contract is to force Hilda back with him, which would only make me wonder why he doesn't just zap up a new Hilda to date. I assume she is morally opposed to brainwashing him into agreeing to help her. Any kid who watched Star Wars would think that they could do the Jedi trick if they're a witch, and it couldn't be hard to visualize either. We then see Harvey wonderfully dancing with Sabrina at the school dance for a while of padding. I'm glad it didn't turn out to be just an imagined spot, because it's so rare for a story to be so nice to Sabrina. Harvey got new shoes, and it's discussed that it's like he couldn't say no. It turns out that whenever music plays, Harvey is forced to dance. Harvey even discusses it with Sabrina later. So he really trusts her, because he just assumes she'll believe him. It turns out the shoes won't let him take them off. And Sabrina can't do it for him either. I assume the dance guy made the shoes this way just to spite Hilda. Sabrina even tries to use a wrench to get the shoes off. An ice cream truck coincidentally passes by, and somehow it forces Harvey to go after instead of forcing him to dance. Thankfully this isn't going to matter to the plot. So it doesn't really matter that it was so unlikely to happen. Like, I've never seen an ice cream truck pass by my house. Zelda says the last time Sabrina reminded her aunts they loved her, she conjured up a beef gravy storm. She wouldn't have done that anyways, and she would have fixed the problem herself. Hilda reveals that a witch can't undo a god's magic. Quigley says Sabrina's grounded. I feel like a mortal shouldn't be allowed to punish a witch relative of his, but this is for a justified reason. It'd be awesome if we never saw her suffer through being grounded, because she's already being punished by the events of the plot. Then Thor gets warped to them when he's still in the bathtub. It's lucky that his bathtub and bubbles are still there. I assume Hilda's warping spell included the condition that they would still be there if he was in the bathtub, and witches got used to having that condition. Predictably, the contract has it that Hilda has to marry him to uncurse Harvey. So Hilda says it's not really so bad if Harvey stays this way. Really a do as I say, not as I do type of parent. Sabrina thinks instantly to manipulate him by saying Harvey's now a better dancer than him, and makes a wager to prove who's the better dancer. If Harvey wins, he gets the shoes off. But what's gonna force this guy to take off the shoes just because he lost the bet? He should say this belly cast will do it. If he really wants Hilda as his bride, even though obviously an unwilling wife would be awful to him, then he won't hold up his end of the bargain. Sabrina tells Harvey the truth without revealing magic. We don't need a scene dedicated to this. Salem snarks about the evil shoe salesman being a part of the lie, when it's not that far-fetched if he just assumes he's a witch. Harvey is smart enough to ask Sabrina what's going on when he sees him. The god shows him that a bunch of judges that are from a long time ago are here for no reason. I guess the spell he casts that screws him over if Harvey wins requires there to be judges. It doesn't really matter that he's giving away that he's supernatural though, because Harvey already figured out the shoes are cursed. So he already knows supernatural figures exist now. So at this point it wouldn't really matter if she told him he's a warlock. If the logic is she's always being spied on, and so she'll instantly get punished if she tells him about witches, well, Chloe knows about witches, nothing happened to Sabrina, and you'd think the people spying on them would be pretty interested in what they're seeing now. Out of nowhere, the god removes Harvey's shoes to see what a good dancer he is without them. Let me guess, he'll still be a good dancer. After all, he did take a dance class. But there's no way the judges would make him the winner regardless. After all, they're biased in the god's favor. They don't like mortals, and they would be scared of pissing him off by admitting that Harvey's better. Harvey somehow ends up going backwards and walk into the judge's table, which somehow causes damage. Someone says that was brilliant, and somehow the hurt judges all agree, because the story needs a happy ending. The god says he mastered every dance. He gets told all he does is reproduce the talent of others, while Harvey's dances are his own, so the judges respect them more. I don't think this writer respects dance then. Almost every dancer in real life just reproduces the dances of others. Usually only people who weren't taught how to dance improvise. So what kind of dance judges would be guaranteed to pick the person who didn't get taught how to dance for a very long time, who was just improvising? It looks like the god turned into a pink tornado and vanished in front of Harvey, which must have been part of the contest spell. Sabrina hugs him, and Harvey says this theater crowd she hangs out with is bizarre. Why does he think she regularly hangs out with them? Logically, there's no way in hell that he doesn't know supernatural people exist by now. It's apparently fine to reveal that magic in general exists, as long as you don't reveal that witches exist, because then that usually causes the mortal to be paranoid of every human around them if something awful happens, because they could be a witch for all he knows. Well, if he thinks he's just a supernatural figure of ill-defining, like an angel, he wouldn't get paranoid. I assume she thinks it's too irresponsible to tell Harvey about magic too. I'm glad Christianity wasn't referenced, but that's just me. Speaking objectively, it would be better writing to just have Harvey say that he assumes this guy is a demon who only looks human, and that he assumes that about all of the judges who were stated to be quite old. It's not all that likely that Hilda's ex would be an outright god, since I'm sure gods are minorities among witches in the witch realm. But if he were a warlock, the plot would be the same, only it'd be more believable. This episode is about Harvey getting given shoes to make him willing to dance with Sabrina that are cursed to force him to dance in response to music. Because Hilda's ex wants a contract Sabrina desperately signed to force Hilda to marry him to get the curse undone. She would hate him her whole life for it, so what's the point? He just wants to say he has her. It's good that it was established that it's impossible to take off the shoes. We should have been shown Sabrina warping the shoes off him, knowing that her aunt could erase his memory anyways. And when the shoes warp back to his feet, then it fully makes sense that the plot happened. But I can assume that's the case, because they're magical shoes. You'd think Salem would be under constant supervision. The plot could have easily not happened if Hilda didn't date this one guy. But if the only real problem with the story is coincidence, it's still a good story. The jerk somehow gets the idiot ball and agrees to cast a spell that has the curse on Harvey removed if the judges vote him the better dancer. I assume that's why he disappeared at the end and Harvey got his life back to normal. So I don't even have to say that the ending was forced. It makes sense that the judges weren't too scared to vote for Harvey if they knew it would cause this jerk to disappear. Maybe they had a grudge against him. I have to assume that he actually died. Otherwise, there'd be no excuse for him not instantly warping back here and putting the shoes back on Harvey and forcing Hilda to marry him. So the impossible happened, and the show actually had a well-written episode. I'll put that in a list. Too bad it makes the marriage contract plot of the later 2000s comic look unoriginal. And of course, it's still in the lower list of good quality episodes because it's still all about magic being evil.